Good day there, this is Joe Van Cleve. Welcome to another episode of the typewriter video series. Today we're going to talk about one of those little recognized but very useful typewriter accessories, which are clipboards. While you may not initially think that a clipboard is a typewriter accessory, but think about for a minute if you have to transcribe some original source material, let's say handwritten notes, onto your typewriter, and you want to be able to hold the original source material up within easy visual viewing next to the typewriter. A clipboard can come in real handy, especially if you have a way of holding the clipboard up at an angle that you need to use for as an easel, if you will. So we're going to look at clipboards today and how they might work along with typewriters. Well, if you've been to office supply stores, you'll know that clipboards come in a wide variety of sizes, shapes, and materials. You know, the most classic kind of a clipboard is something like this, made of masonite board with a built-in clip, and it's usually standard for, at least in the United States, the 8.5 by 11 size standard piece of paper. It'll hold that quite nice. You know, these masonite board clipboards are pretty inexpensive, actually really inexpensive these days. There are also legal size clipboards that you can find in masonite. I found this clipboard is a very cool one. This is made of aluminum, right? So aluminum, nice and rigid and thin. It has the standard clip. This is a Saunders brand clipboard. Very thin, right? And it's also a legal size. It holds a legal size sheet of paper. And another kind of clipboard that you may not easily find, but I've been able to acquire one. This is a plastic clipboard made by TexWipe, which is a company that makes supplies for clean rooms. So this is a clean room clipboard, all plastic. It has a plastic clip with a spring inside instead of the metal clip. Then you have some of these clipboards, like this one is kind of a combination clipboard. It has a little spring clip. It has a little elastic drawstring to keep your paper flat. And on the other side, there's a little cloth pouch for holding documents and a little pencil bag for pens and pencils. So that's kind of a cool clipboard. Then, when I was going to different thrift stores and whatnot, I found this clipboard, and this is really cool. So it literally is a clipboard. It's a board with a clip. And I'm using a bulldog clip for it. But the feature of this clipboard that's so neat, first of all, it's a little bit wider than your standard size clipboard. This is a Thompson manufacturing company out of Axtell, Kansas. And what it has is this bracket that you pull down to a certain angle, and then you can tense it up with a chain. And then it has a cutout here, and it's really a knee board. It's just sitting on your knee on your lap. This is a really cool clipboard, and if you start to see these kinds of clipboards at thrift stores, if you're like me, you'll start like, oh, maybe I should start collecting clipboards. But that's what happens. When you start collecting typewriters, all of a sudden you start seeing other related things. So that's the kind of variety of clipboards that I've been able to find. If you had to choose between a selection of clipboards for using with a typewriter, what are some of the attributes or features that you're going to want to look for? Well, in my view of things, having used clipboards for a while, the most important thing is length. Now, I'm holding up two clipboards, the standard length masonite one and the longer, you might call legal size aluminum one. And in my experience, what's really good about the aluminum clipboard is you stand it up next to your typewriter, just behind the carriage, and we're going to talk about how to stand it up in a little bit here, but you stand it up right behind the carriage, and it's tall enough that a standard size sheet of paper, you're going to be able to see most of the paper above the carriage of the typewriter. And that's real important. If you're using a standard length clipboard, you'll find that the bottom third of the paper you're not even going to be able to see easily. You're going to have to set the clipboard off to the side of the typewriter instead of right behind it, and it's not quite as convenient to use. Well, now we're going to get into the subject of how do you hold the clipboard up at a convenient angle in front of your typewriter, next to your typewriter, right behind it, so the document is within easy viewing distance and at a good angle. Well, the most common sense thing to do, because first of all, they don't really make clipboard holders that I've seen, so you kind of have to make something. And what I found, what I started with, and this thing right here is you're going to say, what the heck is that? Well, it's a multi-purpose thing, but what it really started as originally is a block of oak, which is all it really is based on. And instead of these dowels, there's 4 dowels, 2 short ones and 2 tall ones. I originally just had sheetrock screws, 2 short ones and 2 tall ones. And the whole purpose of the screws is you take your clipboard and you simply set it in here like that, and it supports it at an angle. And the length of the wooden base behind it keeps the clipboard from falling over backwards, right? This is really the best thing I found is for using with clipboards and typewriters is get yourself a nice little piece of wood, a pair of short screws or dowels in the front, a pair of longer ones behind it. The separation distance between the dowels and the height of them determines the angle, and you just want to experiment with that unless you really like trigonometry. You can figure out what kind of an angle you need. Again, the angle on this is not really adjustable. Now this clipboard I mentioned earlier, the plastic one that has the combination clipboard and little pouch for paper and pens, it's actually pretty decent for typewriter use. First of all, the length of it's a little bit longer than the standard length clipboard. It does provide you with a little bit of altitude, a little elevation of your document, and it does fit within my little clipboard holder bracket thingy. Right, so you can use it for the typewriter use. Now the thing that's cool about this clipboard though is because you have a storage pouch in the back, that means you can put your typing paper here, and then in the pen pouch you can put your correction tape cartridge. So this kind of becomes a real practical clipboard for typewriter use, something like this. What if you can't find, the perfect clipboard at a store, or what if you just have a hankering to build one? Well, let's talk about building your own clipboard. If you were thinking about building your own clipboard, what kind of materials do you think you would need? Well, the most basic thing is a thin piece of stiff material. Ideally, masonite works pretty well. If you happen to have some spare masonite laying around. Also, you could use what I've been working on here is a special clipboard, and it's this thin model aircraft plywood that you get at model airplane hobby shops. And I happen to have some scrap pieces from when I built the storage box for the Hermes 3000 naked typewriter. I had some scrap pieces of this aircraft plywood. My biggest advice when you're building your own clipboard is you can go to an office supply store and buy a clipboard for $5, right? So if you're going to make one for yourself, the whole idea is to find some materials around your house, workshop, garage, storage shed. Find some materials that you already have and try to make it as inexpensively as possible. So let me show you what I'm building here. This is a regular, like I say, model aircraft plywood. I've sanded it. I've rounded the corners a little bit by sanding the edges and also the corners. But in order to make this clipboard stand up on its own, instead of using my little multi-purpose wooden bracket thingy with the dowels, I'm going to experiment with making a clipboard that'll stand up on its own. And what I did is, on the back of it, I have a piece of 5/8 square wood. These sticks you can buy at the hardware stores. They're just scrap wood that I had laying around. I have a second piece of similar kind of wood. And I've also put an identical length piece of wood on it. I've just glued these here a little while ago and they're still drying, so this project isn't done yet. But what I'm going to be doing is these are going to fit together like this, and on the top surface of both of these wooden sticks is going to be a set of hinges, right, little brass hinges. And this clipboard is going to pivot like this. And so I'll be able to set the clipboard on a table, and I'll be able to adjust the angle however I want, right? And I'm hoping that the weight of the wood and the grippiness of the bottom edge of both of these will keep it from slipping. But this is going to be my my folding clipboard, kind of an easel style clipboard. And for the clip itself, I'm just going to use a big bulldog clip. Now, this laminated plywood is difficult to cut without the top lamination peeling off. And you notice this little orange colored stuff, that's from using a table saw with a dull blade and cross-cutting it and having it flake off. My advice when you're working with this material, you shouldn't go out and spend $10,000 on woodworking tools to make a clipboard out of scrap material. There's a better way to actually cut this material this thin. It's like a probably 1/8 of an inch or so thickness. Is clamp it down on a workbench, get a metal straight edge, clamp a straight edge along where you want to cut, and then use a really sharp, fresh blade of a hobby knife. Not an X-Acto, more like one of those box cutter type knives where you can put a lot of pressure on it. And you're going to want to repeatedly score the wood along the same line over and over again until you cut almost halfway through the wood. Then you're going to flip it over, put your straight edge on the wood on the other side of it, get it lined up, and then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. And then when you're done with that, you simply break it in half, and you'll have a nice little cut here where the edges on the outer laminations aren't going to be flaking off. All you have to do is sand the middle down. That's the best way to work with this thin model aircraft plywood I found from the years of experience making pinhole cameras. But anyway, I'm going to be working with this, and you'll see later on in the video how this comes out. But I think I'm going to spray paint it silver because I have a spare can of silver paint. And again, the whole point of making your own clipboard is you want to use materials you have around the house and not spend a lot of money, because as I said earlier, you can buy a clipboard for almost next to nothing. We're going to try to make one inexpensively that's more customized. So before I spray paint this, I've gone ahead and countersunk some holes in the back side of the wooden pieces, and I'm putting these little 1/2 inch countersink style screws on both pieces just to give the piece of wood a little bit more strength. Here's an example setup of how I use my long legal size clipboard with my multi-purpose clipboard holder bracket that I made a few years ago. It basically sits behind the typewriter, and I have plenty of room on the typewriter for the typewritten sheet, and I can see virtually the entire piece that I'm copying from. It's right in front of me. I don't have to set it off to the side, way over here or way over there. Works really well. So it's a day later, and after spray painting these wooden pieces and letting them dry overnight, I have myself an interesting little clipboard kind of easel. So I have these brass hinges on top, and I can adjust the angle at which this thing sits, and I'm using a bulldog clip on the front. So this is just kind of an idea for a project of how you might be able to make your own clipboard, and also in general how clipboards can work with typewriters in the process of transcribing material onto paper. Well, I hope you got some good ideas out of this today, and until next time, this is Joe Van Cleve. You have yourself a great day.